This video is sponsored by Skillshare. The first 1,000 viewers to click the link in the description will get a free month's trial. Brian is the pretentious tail-chasing playboy of Family Guy, and when he's not hitting on the ladies in bars, you can find him writing his terrible, terrible book.
Faster than the speed of love.
In this video today, we'll go through his entire life, his puppyhood, being adopted by the Griffins, as well as his death and rebirth. We'll also explore his many past lovers, his relationship with his son, and his rivalry with Quagmire.
You're just a big, sad, alcoholic bore.
So, is this dog a good boy or a hound dog that should have been put down? Stick around to find out, as I'm Lydia from Screen Portal, and this is the complete Brian Griffin timeline. But hold your horses. First of all, please be sure to subscribe to Screen Portal and let me know whose timeline you'd like to see next. Brian's early life. Brian was born on a farm in Austin, Texas, in a litter of 5 puppies. His mother was named Biscuit and his father was named Coco. He was taken as a puppy, which gave him real abandonment issues later on in life, and when Brian got older, he will seek out his mother back at the farm and to meet his first owner.
Refresh my memory, which one were you again?
I was the one who could talk.
The owner told Brian that she passed away, but she still loved him and gave him up so he could have a better life. And even though this gave Brian a bit of closure, this quickly turned into shock as he found that his mother was starved and used as a table. So quite rightly, him and Stewie took her and gave her a proper burial. After leaving the farm, Brian attended Brown University in Rhode Island. With only one course shy of graduating, he cracked under pressure and dropped out of college. Not graduating would haunt him years later, so he went back to finish what he started. But despite working very hard, he would fail to pass the exam and unfortunately never obtained a degree. After leaving university, Brian was left homeless, so like many university graduates, he made money doing what he could, such as cleaning car windows. This is how he met Peter Griffin, who pitied the pooch and invited him round for dinner. They adopted him and gave him the last name Griffin, which was a really nice touch after the loss and abandonment he felt after leaving the farm. So to be actually wanted and loved must have felt pretty special. Brian's life as a Griffin. Brian and Peter were best friends and they did everything together. He even acted as Peter's conscience in a lot of ways.
I told her she was fat. No.
They shared many adventures too, such as going back in time to save Peter's marriage, and when the family were placed into the witness protection program, the two became sheriffs of a small town.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to roll yours down.
Although Brian can be described as being self-absorbed, he can, on the odd occasion, put the needs of others before his own. As man's best friend, he offered up 2 of his kidneys to Peter after his failed, even though it meant his death.
You're saving my life.
Well, you saved mine.
Thankfully, while on the operation table, the doctor offered his kidneys instead. But still, Brian did willingly offer his own life to save his friends. But over the years, the pair drifted apart and stopped hanging out as much. This might be because Quagmire absolutely loathes him.
Quagmire hates me? Hates you.
Brian just couldn't stand the idea of anyone hating him, so invited Quagmire out for dinner. Brian is a dog after all and just wants to be loved, and when Brian pressed him about why he doesn't like him, Quagmire went into a long tirade listing every way he despises him, hitting him where it hurts the most with his writing.
And you delude yourself by thinking you're some great writer even though you're terrible.
Brian prides himself on his wit and intellect and always saw himself as a talented writer, but he brags about his book more than actually sitting down and writing it. I hear you, Brian. Which is something Stewie would relentlessly tease him about.
Little story brewing there, working on that for quite some time, huh?
And Brian dedicated many years of his life writing this book called Faster Than the Speed of Love.
That is the worst title I've ever heard.
But haha on the haters, Brian would eventually get his book professionally published with the help of Carter Pewterschmidt. When Brian starts a campaign to legalize it in Quahog, Mayor West passed a law to legalize said it. But when Carter began to lose money in the timber industry as a result, he bribed Brian by promising to ship 2 million copies of his book if he campaigned against it. So Brian gave up his morals for the sake of sweet success. However, this was all for nothing, as his novel would go down as the worst selling novel of all time, selling 0 copies. As much as he likes to think otherwise, Brian isn't the greatest writer. Instead of hanging around saucy chicks, he should have taken one of the many excellent creative writing courses on Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions come together to take the next step in their artistic journey, whether that be in illustration, editing, music, design, photography, and so much more. Members of Skillshare get unlimited access to thousands of courses created by professionals in their field, waiting to impart their wisdom. And best of all, the classes are broken down into lessons so you can learn at your own pace, in your own time. And for my art and animation fanatics, there are tons of classes for many different levels. And I'm not lying when I say I learned more from watching these videos than I ever did in university, and that's 50 G's down the drain. I get a lot of emails from you guys asking about how to start your own YouTube channel, so I'd really recommend the class taught by Sorella Moore. It's entitled YouTube Success, Build an Authentic Channel That's Worth the Follow. It's full of priceless advice that will help you build your channel and to grow your audience. And you've got to be quick, as the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click on the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. That's 1 entire month of thousands of free classes. So go and click on that link in the description below. Brian's love life. So, who screwed the pooch? Well, pretty much everyone. The little playboy has had an extensive love life and strings of failed relationship. His longest one was with Jillian, a beautiful airhead who had nothing in common with Brian except a bit of hanky-panky. The reason why Brian dated her for so long, apart from the fact that he was a bit of a horn dog, was because he enjoyed feeling intellectually superior. Brian thinks of himself as being incredibly smart, when in reality, not so much. When they break up, Brian is shocked to learn that she was engaged to another man. Realizing too late that he actually loved her, he tried to crash the wedding, but Jillian turned him down.
Brian, no. You had your chance.
Out on the pool, after striking out with several girls, he hit her off with a girl named Jess. She told him that she had cancer and she had a sex bucket list to cross off before she goes, which Brian was only too happy to help out with. After completing the kinky list, Brian found himself in love.
I really like you. I can't remember the last time I felt this happy.
Unfortunately, they soon find out that Jess only has 2 weeks to live, and after realizing that she will never get old and get married, Brian proposes. And as you'd have it, as soon as the two tie the knot, her doctor bursts in and announces that Jess is actually cured. This terrified Brian, as he was now married for the rest of his life, and not hers.
I'm not ready to be married. I gotta get a divorce.
Instead of being all hot and heavy in their honeymoon stage, Brian was now miserable and living with his wife, cramped in an apartment with many cats, and he wanted out. He thought his wish was granted when Jess choked to death on some nachos, but during her eulogy, she miraculously woke up.
I'm okay! It's a miracle!
With his wife now back from the dead, Brian was left with no other option than to fake his own death. But it's Peter who lets Brian know all the wonders of marriage, like letting yourself go and having everything done for you. This reawakened Brian, and he could finally let out all of his weight.
Wow, that feels amazing.
Now a lazy hubby, Jess was at the end of her rope and gave Brian over to the pound. Luckily, Peter found out just in time, saving his best friend before being euthanized. After a confrontation between husband and wife where she reminded him that he also let her die before, they realized they deserved each other and so agreed to give it one more go, only for her to die in the very next scene. But perhaps Brian's biggest crush is the redhead beauty he lives with. The only issue, aside from the fact that he's a dog and she's, well, a human, is that Lois is married to his best friend Peter. Still, this fact hasn't stopped him from sniffing around her constantly. He actually confessed his love for her once, which, as you'd expect, didn't go down too great. Eventually, his dreams did come true when he married her. This is when Peter got lost at sea and was presumed dead. Brian stepped up to be the new man of the house, and yes, that's right, he went from the doghouse to just plain the house. Brian proposed to Lois and got a job to support the family too. And just in case you're wondering, no, they didn't consummate the marriage. When Peter turned up alive and well, Brian knew Lois missed her ex-husband, so Brian did the noble thing and ended their marriage.
There's no possible way I can ever thank you enough for this.
Although Brian tends to go for females of the two-legged variety, he has on the occasion dated his own species, including Ellie the show dog. But most like his other women in his life, it didn't work out. To get to the root of his lousy love life, Stewie invited every one of Brian's exes over to explain how each of their relationship ended, and so built a list of Brian's many flaws.
He's insecure and a blowhard.
But Brian barked back, causing all of his past lovers to chase him across town. But not all of his relationships ended fruitlessly. One of Brian's first loves was to Tracy Finnegan, which led to Brian the father. When Brian looked up Tracy, he was shocked to find out how much she had changed. Before he had a chance to run away, she introduced him to someone special.
This is Dylan. He's your son.
With no interest of being a father, he quickly got out of there, but Tracy dumped Dylan at his house the next day and Brian was forced to step up and be a father. In a heart-to-heart, he apologized for not being there for him and promised to be a good dad, and Brian kept to his word, being a supportive father and turning his unruly son's life back around. But seeing just how much of a mess his mum was, Dylan decided that she needed him more and chose to look after her.
Good luck.
Goodbye, Dad.
With Dylan now gone, Brian lost interest in fatherhood and rarely saw his son. That was until he found out that his son was an actor on the Disney Channel. Only then did Brian become interested in hanging out. Using his son, Brian forced himself into the writer's room and immediately started interjecting his crappy ideas into the show. Pushing his luck too far, he was fired, and Dylan accused Brian of using him. Seeing the error of his selfish ways, Brian apologized and asked if he could have another shot.
I'd like that too, Dad.
Brian and Stewie. Brian and Peter were best friends and did everything together, but as I mentioned earlier, they stopped hanging out as much and Brian found himself spending more time with Stewie. This relationship was first explored in the episode Road to Rhode Island, where they had to travel across the country to get back home after losing their money. Since then, they've journeyed across Europe, traveled through time, and across dimensions. As a result of these adventures, they are super close, and whenever Brian is feeling down, Stewie is always there to cheer him up.
But the truth is,
You're my only friend, Brian. If I didn't have you, I'd be lost.
Stewie would do anything for his best friend, including bringing him back from the dead, which is exactly what he does. Brian's death and rebirth. During one of Brian's and Stewie's time travel hijinks, they tampered with the past and messed up the future. Realizing just how dangerous his invention was, Stewie destroyed the time machine.
So I've decided to get rid of it before something irreparable happens.
But Stewie would come to regret that decision, as on one sunny day when they were preparing to play hockey, a speeding car came out of nowhere and ran over Brian. Taking him to the vet, a dying Brian bid farewell to his family.
I love you all.
This was big news in the cartoon world when it happened, as the creators confirmed that Brian was gone for good and never coming back. Brian was quickly replaced by Vinny, who stuck around for only 2 episodes until the fans demanded the return of Brian. When Christmas came around, Stewie's only wish was for his best friend back, but with no time machine, all hope seemed lost. But then he remembered his past self traveling to his current day to scout Christmas presents. So tracking himself down, he commandeered his time machine and traveled to the exact point when Brian was run over. He pushed him out of the way just in time and so saved his friend. And so normality has been restored. Brian's later years. I've covered the future-themed episodes before on the Peter and Stewie timeline, so I won't go into too much detail here, but let's quickly see where Brian ends up. In the Stewie and Stew's Excellent Adventure, we find out that Brian died from eating chocolate. And in Old Rich Stewie, set 50 years into the future, Brian's life has been extended by a pill. Stewie snuck it into his food and showed him that global warming was fake.
Oh my god, we were so wrong about that. If anything, it's way colder now.
Although I think Stewie actually gave him the pill because he couldn't live without his best friend. And so that concludes the Brian Griffin timeline. What's your favourite Brian moment? Let me know in the comments below. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as it really helps it grow and it really helps me out. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys later.